guys, and welcome back to my channel today. I really wanted to talk about a very important, tender, and honestly, a very misunderstood topic, which is navigating intimacy when one partner has experienced trauma. Whether you're the partner with the trauma or you're the partner trying to love and support the partner who has experienced trauma, this conversation is definitely going to be for you. Um, so we're going to just first start off with like understanding the impact that trauma has on intimacy. And so when you think of trauma, especially sexual trauma, emotional and relational trauma, these types of traumas can really leave deep imprints on how we experience closeness, trust, and even vulnerability. So for some, touch might actually feel very unsafe. For others, emotional intimacy can feel rather exposing. So trauma really teaches the body to protect itself. That's exactly what trauma is. And sometimes it teaches us to protect ourselves even from the people we really do love. So it's not necessarily anything personal. It's just a trauma response to what has happened, in the past. And so that's our body's way of kind of like becoming a defense mechanism because it doesn't really understand the differences yet between safe and unsafe. And so that comes with time, and doing inner work so that you can really understand how to effectively communicate what feels safe and what feels unsafe to you. Um, okay, so here's the thing, right? So again, these responses are not about rejection, it's really about survival. And so the brain is basically saying, this feels familiar and not in a good way. So the body tends to shut down. Okay, so I'll say that again. So the brain is saying this feeling like, so if you're touching me, even though you're a safe person, you're a safe space, but still you're touching me very similar to how I experienced a traumatic event, then the brain is saying, this is not good. And so I have to shut down in order to protect myself. Okay, and so what this can actually look like in relationships, how it shows up in your relationship is that you might notice that, your partner is withdrawing during intimacy. They're probably avoiding touch or they're needing lots of space. And, you might feel hurt because of that. You might feel pretty confused. You might feel rejected. And if you don't name what's happening, both of you can spiral into like this misunderstanding. That's why it's so important to do a lot of inner work when you've experienced trauma, because you have to be able to call a thing, and you have to be able to identify it. You need to process it. You need to go through all of the steps as opposed to kind of like pushing it under the rug or kind of blocking it out of your mind, because in some shape, form, or fashion, it's going to resurface at some other point in time in your life. And such as like sexual type of trauma, that tends to kind of surface a lot in your relationships, your intimate relationships. So one thing I would say, what not to do. Like, so if you are the person who is trying to support the person who has experienced trauma, um, try your best not to pressure your partner. This is an absolute no-no. And this is where your partner can completely shut down. Again, because that's a defense mechanism, that's a safety concern. Again, the body, the brain doesn't know the difference. It just knows that something seems very similar to when I felt unsafe. And so I'm going to shut down. So make sure that you're not pressuring your partner to be intimate in those ways. Also, try your best not to take it personally, because again, it's not necessarily about you. It's about the experiences that they've had, and that there are always these little triggers that could be just going off with them. It could be something that you said, something that you did, and it's not because of you. It's just because the brain is identifying to them, this looks very similar or feels very similar to the traumatic experience that I've had in the past. Okay. And don't expect things to just, be normal, and when I say it like that, because obviously in the world, especially like in therapy, we usually don't try to use those words like normal, because we don't want people to feel like something is wrong with them or like they're defected. But you have to understand that a person who has experienced trauma is going to experience intimacy um, in a different way than probably what you're used to, especially if they haven't quite done a lot of deeper work to kind of deal with the trauma, or even if they have, they still may have certain things that really trigger them. And so you want to be very conscious of that, very cognizant of that, and approach in a way that exudes safety for that person. Um, and also remember that these things take time, so try your best not to put this time constraint or a time limit on when they should just get it together, or when they should just move beyond, this trauma. That's not exactly how that works. It is definitely a process. And so pressure can make trauma responses worse. Healing does not work on your schedule. It works on the nervous system's schedule. Okay. But now what you can do instead is open the conversations up. Just create a space to be able to talk. So talk about their boundaries. Ask them what feels safe to them. Use language like, what do you need in this moment? Or is this okay for you? Always be asking questions just to check in. That allows for your partner to feel a sense of control, agency over their bodies, their minds, their feelings, that they probably felt like, and they probably still feel like they did not experience during those traumatic events. And so you want to be able to promote that. You want to promote that autonomy for your partner. And so asking them some very specific questions about what feels good, what doesn't feel good, is this okay? Tell me about what feels safe for you. Tell me what language helps you to feel safe too, because we have to think about the words too that we use can also really promote a trigger response as well. Consent is continuous. I don't know how many times I can say that. Like, consent will also always be paramount when it comes to dealing with someone who has had a traumatic experience. So trauma sensitive intimacy means that you're checking in. Even if you've done something 100 times before, just continuously check in. Don't say like, oh, you told me a month ago that this was fine, so that's why I'm doing it like this to you now. It's like, nope, that's not how that works. So you have to check in every single time, because again, the traumatic experience can also make that person kind of go through these cycles where one day things could feel good, but then the other day it might not feel so well. And so that's why it's so important to make sure that you are connecting with your partner in a trauma sensitive type of way when it comes to intimacy. Also, safety first always. Make sure that the physical and emotional safety is a priority. And that could mean slowing things down, cuddling without sex. This is a big one, especially for a lot of women, okay? Um, Trauma or no major trauma, but a lot of women have experienced trauma. Unfortunately, in our society, women are still very much vulnerable species, and so traumatic responses to things are unfortunately very common for a lot of women. So making sure that you're connecting physically with your partner without the goal of sex, and pausing intimacy altogether while you're actually rebuilding trust too. So if trust has been broken, or maybe you did or said something that made them really uncomfortable, even if you didn't mean it, you got to make sure that you take a step back from that physical intimacy for a minute until you can rebuild that safe space for your partner. And of course, as always, therapy helps, so if trauma is affecting your connection overall, couples therapy, or some type of individual therapy with a trauma informed clinician can be a huge game changer. So you don't have to navigate this alone, okay? You all are not in this alone. Make sure that you bring in a professional that can really walk you through the process, because there's a lot of things that sometimes even the person experiencing trauma doesn't really know what's going on with them. And so having someone that's well versed in that specific intervention will help them to understand a little bit more about what's going on with them, and to have language around it, and to be able to effectively communicate it to their partners as well. And um, so for you, the person who has not experienced the trauma, you might be thinking, now what about me? Like what about my needs? And that's totally valid. Like supporting a partner with trauma doesn't mean ignoring your own emotional and physical needs. So I definitely want to make sure that I make that disclaimer. But it does mean that you need to learn how to express um, to them with compassion and not demand. And so, if you feel like that's going to be a huge challenge for you to be compassionate and not demanding majority of the time, then maybe you being in a relationship with someone who has experienced this level of trauma may be something that you want to rethink. And that's just being honest, right? Because this is a lifelong process. It's something that a person will continuously be working throughout their lives. And if you're not ready for that type of relationship, you need to be honest with yourself and with your partner as well. Um, but just so you all know, like love, connection, all of this stuff is still possible even when someone has experienced trauma in their lives. So trauma, it just changes the way we relate, right? Like it just literally like rewires our thinking, unfortunately. But it doesn't make deep connected intimacy impossible. And in fact, when couples really navigate this with care and patience, the bond can become so much stronger. um, and you know what? I'm just saying this too because I've worked with couples who have either both experienced trauma or one person, and it can feel very demanding on the person who hasn't experienced the trauma, to where it's like, wow, I can never say anything right. I can never do anything right. And that's why it's so important to also reach out to a professional who can help you with the language, who can help you with the different responses to different situations and how to show up and role play these situations too, so that you feel a little bit more empowered on what can I do, because a lot of times there's no blueprint for any of this stuff. We're all learning as we go. But if you have someone, or you look into getting a professional who really understands the background of trauma, then they can guide you through something that can be very difficult, but also very enlightening. And it can also make you feel empowered in your relationship when you feel like you can really speak to what your partner needs. Um, so let me know if this video resonated with you. I just always ask that you like the video, you subscribe, and drop a comment, because, I definitely like to hear you all's thoughts and hear your opinions on things, and maybe what's helped you or your partner feel safer, in intimacy. And just remember that healing isn't a straight line, but connection is always possible. So definitely like and subscribe, check out more of my videos, and I look forward to more of these talks with you all.